few more people. Dial in. Hey, good morning. Let's get things rolling. Welcome to our Sacramento Summit preview training day. Very important. First of all, let me welcome all of our returning members. It's great to have everyone that's been with us for these last 6 years, and to all our new members. We've got a great influx here, kind of post-COVID of new members, new companies starting up, a lot of excitement and activity in the industry, so it's great to see. And so welcome to everyone, and to our gathering here as the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. So Sacramento, it's been since 2019 that we've gone up to Sacramento. I actually got the pleasure of going up a couple weeks ago with our group around SB 620, including Mason and Alyssa. It's the first time I've been up into the Capitol in several years. Forgot about how exciting it is and all the energy that you get. I also forgot about what a self-contained world it is up there. Sometimes if you're not up interacting with the people directly, I'm not sure if they hear us. So this is a very important thing that we do. It's I think the fact that we've been doing it via virtually for the last few years has given us continuity, which is fantastic. One thing that we've definitely learned with the OREC bill and since then is that relationships matter. And going up and having the contact, talking to the people, being consistent with our messages, gives us a presence, gives us those relationships, opens the communication, and really kind of enables all the other things for us, for being able to have a seat at the table in Sacramento and with the administration, and to be able to understand the legislation and to be able to have some sway with the lawmakers in the end. So very excited for this, and thank you everyone for coming in to give a preview, and hope to see everybody on Tuesday up in Sacramento. So with that, let me just go through what to expect on Tuesday. Let's see, do we have a map, Lexi, or a PowerPoint to refer to?
I'll get that. Hold on. Sorry.
Okay. So we're going to be starting off at 8:00 a.m. at the Expo grounds for the Capitol. So if you're going to be doing a tent or a table or some sort of display there at the Expo, I'd say you can start showing up anytime around 7. The area will be available. I think we'll have people starting to set up between 7 and 8. I'd ask that you try to have all the materials there by 8:00. So maybe not fully set up, but at least pretty close to it. So you can see here in the center of the state capitol. So that is where we're going to be having most of our legislative visits. And so most of the activity will be walking back and forth between where it says Expo and where we've got our California Outdoor, our Corp logo there. So that's where we're going to be set up. Last year, or actually when we did this in 2019, I believe we were on the north side of the Capitol, which was great, just kind of outside of the building. This year, lots of construction going on, and that actually even extends a little bit further into that square 27 than what it shows there from my experience trying to walk through there a couple weeks ago. So lots of construction, so that's why we're kind of meeting a little bit further out in the Expo area. But we should still, it's only about a block to get to the Capitol, so pretty easy walk. There will be a few other meetings outside of the Capitol. We do have one group will be meeting with GoBiz, and another group will be meeting with CNRA. So those will not be at the Capitol, but they're close by. So we'll have addresses, and there'll be short walks, like within 10 minutes of the Expo area. So again, Expo is where we'll be setting up for the day with our kind of our base camp, if you will. So we'll have tents there from our exhibiting companies. We'll also have coffee and some bagels, donuts, something like that for breakfast at 8 o'clock. We'll kick off the activities at 8:30 formally with some speakers. We'll have our lobbyist, Houston, give a short talk. Also, Assembly Member Steve Bennett will be there, and we might have another speaker as well, kind of depending on the schedule and who's there. It'll also give us a chance to get together in teams in person and kind of prepare ourselves. It's always good with these 4 or 5 person groups to just have a little bit of understanding of who's going to lead, who's going to be the first one to talk, what are we going to say as we go through, and it's kind of gives you a level of comfort before you walk in, because otherwise we're kind of shuffled in those rooms pretty quickly, and they basically say go, and so it's good to know what's going on. So 8 to 9 we'll be assembling there at the Expo. 9 o'clock, we're going to start lobbying. So people will have their first session starting at 9 o'clock. So that will be heading over to the Capitol. Again, we'll be splitting down into smaller groups, I believe 4 or 5 people. And each group will have a schedule to follow. Also at that time, the Expo is going to be open at 9 o'clock. That's for staff members to come by. So lobby legislators that we're not meeting with, or their staff, if they want to come out, see what's going on, see who the companies are, hear a little bit about what we're doing. You're not actually allowed to lobby, I believe, in the Expo setting, but we are able to educate. So that should last until noon. At noon, we'll all come. We don't have any lobbying scheduled, so we'll have lunch there at the Expo area. So we'll provide sandwiches. If you have any special requests, please let Lexi know before the Expo, or things that allergies, etc. But otherwise, we'll just have a small selection of sandwiches, drinks, gathering from 12 to 1 at the Expo. We should have some staffers coming by in that time frame. And then we're very lucky at 12:30, Secretary Wade Crofet is going to come out and speak with us. He's a very personable guy if you haven't met him before, and we've done a number of activities with him over the last several years. So he's going to come out and talk to our group at 12:30, which is perfect. We're there, we're going to be in force as much as we are at any time in the Capitol. So it's great to get someone as high visibility as Wade Crowfoot to come out and work with us.
Package. No problem.
So that's going to be from 12 to 1. 1 o'clock, we'll go back to the Capitol to do more lobbying. So we'll have additional sessions scheduled from 1 until 4. And then at 4 o'clock, we'll be all finished with our in-person sessions, and we'll be coming back to the Expo area. Hope to have happy hour, depending on our permit. But we will try to have that from 4 to 6, and then we'll have additional speakers, including Deputy Secretary Catherine Toy, Deputy Secretary for Access, who we've met with before, great person. Director Armando Quintero, who is the Director of State Parks, which is great. We've not had a chance to meet with him in person before, so this will be our first chance of being in person, and a great chance to make an impact on the person who's in charge of our state park system. Also, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan, who is sponsor of our bill this year on rolling back some of the fire retardant requirements for tents. So good afternoon speaker session as well. So you want to definitely stay for the whole day. So again, really looking forward to it. This is our moment to shine, to come together and speak with one voice, and to really kind of amplify our ability as an industry to influence Sacramento. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lexi.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Hey, everyone. Really excited that we're going to be back in Sacramento finally. I think we've been promising it for a few years now, and we finally are going back. So it's going to be great. I mostly have been staffing AB 267 this session. It is our tent manufacturers bill, and we are the lead sponsor. but it has been cruising through the assembly very well. It is currently on consent in assembly appropriation, so it will make it out, and then it'll hit the assembly floor before it goes into the Senate. So I'm not too worried about it at this point in the process, but I think there will be some hurdles in the Senate on that bill. Next slide.
I like the photo.
Yeah, it was exciting. We had Kim Suarez from Marmot testify in hearing, and she did great. So I'm really excited about that. So yeah, that's our top priority, although it's not going to be our top priority for the summit because we're not worried about it right now. The rest of our policy agenda includes various bills that impact our industry in different ways. We have SB 620, which is a low impact camping bill. And we'll have Mason from Hip Camp speak about that later. We'll have AB 411, Surface Trails Bill. We'll have our lobbyist Doug Houston speak on that on this webinar. We'll also have AB 401 on the agenda. I'll speak about that. It's the fourth grader state Part B waiver. We'll have AB 1150, which is co-sponsored by California State Parks Foundation and our partner Outdoor Outreach. So Sonia Diaz from Outdoor Outreach will speak on that on this webinar. And then we have SB 560, which is our propane canister recycling bill. We'll have Josh Simpson from Little Camper speak on that. And then we also have AB 618, campsite reservation cancellation, and I'll speak about that later on the webinar. And lastly, our other priority is SB 668, which is State Parks Special Agreement Bill. That has already passed first house. It passed assembly this past month. So we will not be focusing on that in the assembly, but I can touch base about that later in the webinar. And biggest question I'm getting right now is where are we in the legislative process right now? Right now, we are past the deadline for bills to be introduced, so no new policy will be coming up, except for things going into the governor's budget. Then we've got the last day for policy committees to meet and pass bills in first house coming up on May 12th. And then we also have the last day for fiscal committees to pass bills out of first house, so May 19th. And then we'll have the last day for each house to pass bills out of first house June 2nd. And then the budget bill must be passed by June 15th. So the priority right now for everyone is getting out of appropriations committee. Most things are out of first committee at this point. And that's what we'll be focusing on is appropriations meetings during the summit ahead of bills having to get out of the assembly. So for those that aren't familiar, if a bill is labeled as AB, that means it's an assembly bill. If it's SB, it's a Senate bill. And that means that it's still in its first house at this point. It needs to pass out before it goes to either the assembly or the Senate next. And with that, I will pass it over to Doug Houston, our lobbyist. He's going to talk about the state of the legislature and give a little bit of policy talk.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So real quick, so I'll provide a little bit of background going into your engagement with the legislators and staff next week. So you probably heard our fiscal condition in the state of California is a little dire right now. Governor proposed in January a budget that contained it's a deficit spending budget. We're roughly $22.5 billion in the hole. That means that we anticipated to be a little stronger on the revenue side, and making a bad situation even worse. Our revenues have sort of been free falling even since that time in January. So I anticipate in May, we're going to have what's called the May revise. It's a revision of the governor's January budget. I would expect at the time, we're probably going to be looking at a $30 billion deficit in the state of California. What's further complicating things is that while we have a deadline to approve a budget by the end of June, it's going to be more or less a faux budget. We're really not going to have a true sense of what our revenues are going to look like until October, because we've extended the deadline on filings until October, the middle of October. for your income taxes in the state of California. All that being said, I just read the Department of Finance's newsletter. It sounds like revenue decline is being mitigated a little bit. It's not as accelerated as it once was this last month. In addition to that, the governor is proposing to balance the budget without even tapping our reserves. The state of California has over $30 billion in reserves. So I think the message going to the legislature is protect and preserve, stop the bleeding. The governor in his budget is proposing to reduce by $6 billion funding and investments in his climate package. And some of those expenditures included, $400 million to the State Coastal Conservancy. Important to me was I had helped to secure about $35 million last year for natural surface trails in the state of California. Governor's proposing to eliminate that. There's reductions in state parks and pretty much across the board. So I think if there is an opportunity to provide some messaging to legislators and staff, I don't think we need to be as quixotic to think that we're going to get more revenues in our space, outdoor and climate space moving forward, but let's try to protect and preserve what we have and help to shore off any kind of additional free falling in spending in those areas. So importantly, and I know that you as an organization haven't formally taken a position on we have climate bonds, resources bonds that are moving forward in both houses. And, a lot of people are asking me, is this real? Is it really going to happen? Part of the governor's discussion around his budget in January, knowing full well that he was going to have to reduce some of those investments in climate space, were to really find an alternative way to maintain that commitment in the climate space. So during his presentation and remarks of the state of the budget, he had mentioned the possibility of working with the legislature to advance a climate resources bond. So we do have two, AB 1567, which has been introduced by Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia, and then SB 867, which was introduced by Senator Allen. In sort of comparing and contrasting the two, they're both very sizable. They're both going to be in excess of $15 billion. And I know a lot of people have sticker shock over the notion of $15 billion. But for those of you that were around in California in 2006, we actually passed a series of bonds that totaled about $40 billion, Props 1A through 1E. So this isn't insurmountable. And frankly, the polling around this suggests that the threshold for bond debt is anywhere from 12 to 15 to $16 billion in this space. So it's manageable and it's doable. Again, going back to the comparison and contrast, the Assembly version is the #1 priority of the Legislative Hispanic Caucus. It tends to look at investments through more of an urban equity lens. Lots of money for parks, green spaces, almost $1 billion for what's called the statewide park program, which really tries to infuse park dollars into park poor communities and disadvantaged communities. And then the Senate version more looks at investments through a conservation, nature-based solutions, 30 by 30 lens. It's really being driven to a significant degree by the Nature Conservancy. At some point, and we're hoping within the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a preliminary meeting of the minds between the two authors to start to discuss reconciliation on the bonds. But in the meantime, both important vehicles that are going to provide billions of dollars to protecting and preserving California, enhancing outdoor recreational opportunities. And I think at some point, I'd like to have that conversation, revisit this, and really secure a strong support position out of Corp going forward, because it's going to be very helpful to the outdoor industry ultimately. I think that's it for now.
Great, thanks, Doug. Switching it over to Sonia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonia Diaz. I'm the Public Policy Manager with Outdoor Outreach. Thank you all for having me join your webinar this morning. And thank you all for your support. AB 1150 is a bill that has been reintroduced since last year. We tried running this bill last year. And it basically increases or expands access for nonprofit organizations to operate at state parks. And this is via community access agreements. Currently, the Department of Parks and Rec cannot or is not authorized to enter into agreements of this sort. And what our organization has struggled, even locally, and it's not just us, there's organizations all across the state that are trying to run ongoing programs at state parks and beaches and keep coming up against these permit barriers. And so every time we have to take out even a small group of 12 of our youth out to a surfing activity, for example, at a state beach, we have to take out what's called a special event permit. And these special event permits come with a little cost, which adds up. And so we're just trying to eliminate that barrier through this bill by creating more flexibility for the state parks to enter these community access agreements, which could last up to 5 years, instead of us having to take out a permit every time we run a program. So it's good, removing the green tape, so to speak, bill. And it's a committee bill actually introduced by the Assembly Water, Parks and Wildlife Committee. And it's received bipartisan support. So we really hope we can get through the Assembly, which I don't think we'll have a problem, but once it gets to the Senate, we'll have to start educating some of our especially newer members that may not be familiar with this issue. And right now it's in the Assembly Appropriations Committee on the suspense file, but we expect it to come off suspense. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Lexi, I'm sorry not to disrupt the flow, but I failed to talk about 411.
Yeah.
Maybe 411.
We can go back to that really quick if you want.
Sure. Any questions for
Sonia.
Sonia? For
Yeah.
Sonia first? Any questions? No. Okay. So folks, as I'd mentioned real quick, there was $35 million in the budget for natural surface trails, and that's what this bill is all about. It's trying to find more dedicated funding for natural surface trails, hiking, equestrian, mountain biking in the state of California. Currently, we have a single source for natural surface non-motorized trails in the state of California. It's the Rec Trails program. It's a federally funded program. $1.7 million in the state of California for these sorts of trail improvements. This is a state that has a $300 billion budget. So there's been some challenges in moving this forward in that these monies were redirected long ago in 2013 to prop up what's called the active transportation program. But there was a promise to restore these funds. They haven't been restored. So we're trying to be creative, cobble together funding sources within existing programs that have a trails element into more and aggregate them into a single bill moving forward, where on an annual basis, about $10 to $12 million versus 1.7 would be available for grant purposes. So important bill for the outdoors, and sorry for disrupting the flow again.
No worries. Great. Next up, we have Josh Simpson from Little Camper to talk about the propane canister recycling bill.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, all set.
Okay, that's better. Thank you. All right, so last year there was Senate Bill 1256 sponsored by or authored by Bob Wachowski that would call for the ban of cylinders in a 5-year timeline. The governor vetoed that bill, and this year Senate Bill 560, authored by Senator Laird from Santa Cruz, calls for an extended producer responsibility framework that will address the cost of compressed gas cylinders that are used primarily for outdoor recreation. Helium is the outlier from the recreational standpoint, because most of the tanks covered under this bill will be 1 pound propane and then different sizes of butane and isobutane. But there are also disposable helium tanks that are sold for, I guess, mainly for balloons, for parties. Anyway, the idea of this bill is to make it so that in California, when you are purchasing one of these products, that the manufacturer has already built in the end of life retirement cost of the container into the cost of the product that people pay for at retail. This is not a fee bill, so this does not have a cost attached on a receipt for the purchaser of the tank. It is actually a situation where the manufacturers would have to create an organization that would determine the collection, transportation, and disposal cost of these tanks, and then build that cost into what they charge their distributors and customers, and as a consequence have the funds necessary to provide the resources to the organizations that will actually go through the process of collecting, transporting, and recycling the tanks. It's a problem that's taken a long time to come to a place where there's a solution, but the governor signaled in his veto notes last year that he wanted to solve this problem, but did not want to call for a ban on the compressed gas cylinders, but rather wanted an extended producer responsibility framework built around this problem. And that's what Senator Laird's bill proposes. I was in the Environmental Quality and Judicial Committee hearings on the bill, and it seems to be moving through pretty well. Senator Laird, I think, is considered a likely candidate for speaker in the next year or so. So it seems like he's being given a fair amount of latitude with respect to right now. The bill doesn't have specific language. He is pulling the parties that will be covered under this legislation to the table to negotiate those details, and they will be coming out, I believe, in the weeks ahead. And I think that's pretty much what you need to know. I'll be happy to answer any questions if I know the answers.
Anyone have
I've
any?
got a quick question.
Sure.
Does that mean that only companies that participate in this program will be allowed to sell their products in California?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it will be go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say one point of clarification. I'm sorry about that, Josh, but you are correct. Senator Laird is in line for leadership. It's on the Senate side, we call them the pro tem, not the speaker.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Sure.
Any other questions on the propane recycling bill? Has Mason joined us yet?
I'm here.
Great, Mason.
Just in
you're
time.
up. Yeah.
Hey, Lexi. Hi, everyone. Lexi, about how much time should I speak to this?
Got about 5 minutes.
Okay, you got it. Hi, everyone. Mason Smith here, and I lead government relations for HipCamp. And I'm here speaking on behalf of Senate Bill 620, low impact camping areas. So this is authored by Senate Majority Leader Senator McGuire, who is looking to define this new type of camping or new type of land use, what we're calling low impact camping. And the idea is to create more places for more people to get outside for overnight stays. I'm sure we've all seen and experienced the boom in outdoor recreation, especially since the pandemic. And I imagine many folks have tried to book campsites and had a little bit of trouble There's even a bill from RBK in the assembly side to address this as well. But the point being that there just aren't enough campsites to accommodate all the people who want to get outside, both Californians and visitors alike. And so ultimately, the intention of this bill is to make the outdoors and camping specifically more accessible to more people. In the bill, in more detail, what it does is to define low impact camping areas and to create safeguards for these areas. And a bit of a backstory here is that to date, the Housing and Community Development Agency, HCD, currently considers all camping areas to be the same, ranging from those with as few as 2 campsites and no amenities, all the way up to massive RV parks with hundreds or thousands of sites, rec rooms, swimming pools, and full hookups. And so it's all overseen exactly the same way. And 620 will modernize the rules such that those on the lower end of the spectrum, low impact camping, have a set of rules and safeguards that are more appropriate and right-sized for those operations and are distinct from those on the far other end of the spectrum that are larger, more traditional campgrounds. HipCamp is part of a very large and very diverse coalition of supporters for SB 620. It includes local government, because 620 will also clarify and affirm that local governments can create rules that work for them and their communities for these low impact camping areas. It also includes farmers and ranchers, because many hosts of these low impact camping areas are farmers and ranchers and increasingly depend on this revenue as a diverse revenue stream, despite floods and fires and everything in between. Also includes groups supporting equitable outdoor access, because this will bring more people, more types of people to the outdoors in an affordable way, as well as conservation agencies, organizations like the Xerces Society. I can go into detail on the specifics of what a low impact camping area would be defined as, if that's helpful, or answer any other questions. I think I'm probably short of 5 minutes, so happy to field questions.
The definition would be helpful, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. So one of the most important parts of the definition is the number of sites per property, and that is 9 or fewer. So anything with, not anything, but properties with 9 or fewer are eligible to be low impact camping areas. Those with 10 or more would be considered a special occupancy park, which is what they're currently called under existing code. There are other conditions for what defines a low impact camping area. For example, there is a 14 consecutive night stay limit, which is similar to California state parks and many of the federal land management agencies. And that's to draw a really clear distinction between this being a temporary recreational use and not intended to be something intended for long-term housing. And there are a couple other points within the bill that make that clarification as well. For example, needing permission of the landowner to qualify as a low impact camping area and to stay on that property. There's a disallowance for on-street parking. There are a few call-outs, like I mentioned earlier, the support from local government. There are a few call-outs where local government rules do need to be adhered to, specifically for fire safety, for quiet hours, for the responsible management of human waste and of trash. There's also a line in here about transient occupancy tax, also known as TOT, sometimes referred to as hotel tax. This is a tax on transient occupancy or stays typically shorter than 29 nights. And the bill specifies that if the local government requires remittance of TOT for this type of stay, this type of transient occupancy, then that should be adhered to as well. Those are the highlights, Josh, of what defines a low impact camping area.
Any other questions for Mason?
That's great. Thank you.
My pleasure. The last thing I'll say before we move on, Lexi, is maybe you've gone here already, or maybe you're going there, but the bill did pass Senate Housing Committee week before last and had unanimous and bipartisan support. It was heard in appropriations yesterday and has moved on as a suspense candidate to be heard and for the state to dive into the details on the fiscal impact.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. Yeah. So the 2 Senate bills will be our priority in the Senate at this time, since they are both in appropriations. All right. And on to our other policy. So yeah, I've been staffing AB 267, and I can turn on my camera for this, sorry. AB 267 is our tent manufacturers bill. Basically, right now, the California State Fire Marshal's Office has a 45-year-old law that requires tent manufacturers to add flame retardants to their tents if they're selling in California. And that law was put into code back when tents were made out of canvas, highly flammable, and now they're made out of things like polyester and nylon, not as flammable, and these flame retardants contain toxics for humans. So it's been a priority of the industry to get this taken out, and we finally introduced a bill about it this session. It's backed by partners of ours like REI, the North Face, Marmot, Mountain Hardware, Hilleberg, and others, Nemo. And basically, we all want to see it taken out. And some of these tent manufacturers do not sell in California right now because of it. We are one of the last 6 states to still require it, and also Canada requires it as well. So hopefully we will get this taken out very shortly. As for the rest of our policy list, we've gone through SB 620, AB 411 Doug talked about. AB 401 is our 4th grade state park fee waiver. Currently, there's a fee waiver on the federal side for national parks, so this is matching that, so that California state parks will allow every kid in a park, basically. And so it'll be for 4th graders to have that waiver. And we supported it last session. It did not pass, but hopefully it will pass this session. We've got, and that is currently, I believe, in appropriations in the Assembly. AB 1150, Sonia talked about. SB 560, Josh talked about. And then we've got AB 618, which is campsite reservation cancellation and Golden Bear Pass discount. Basically, state parks has been seeing a huge increase of participants in the outdoors, and reservations for campsites at state parks are really hard to get at this point. And so Keith from the Assembly Parks, Water Parks and Wildlife Committee helped introduce this bill with Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, who's also the author of our tent manufacturer bill. She is now the lead of Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee, so the chair. So basically, she's been heading up a bunch of bills that we care about a lot. So this bill in particular is going to give people a credit if they cancel their campsite 7 days ahead of time, because currently a lot of people show up to campgrounds and all the reservations are booked out, but the campsite is empty. And so it actually was a, kind of a pet project of Keith's. He has had that happen to him himself, and all of us kind of resonated with it and wanted to support that. We are working on a couple amendments with Keith, and we'll be meeting with him on Tuesday. So you may be in those meetings to talk to Keith directly about maybe how to tighten the bill up and make it a little better. But we're really excited about that. And then the other bill on our list is SB 668. We will not be focusing on it because it already passed first House. But what this bill does is it is basically dealing with operating agreements for state parks. We have it's a current law right now where nonprofits can partner with state parks to basically volunteer within the state park and hold programs. So those are your docents, interpreters, people from nonprofits that are helping out at state parks. So state parks is benefiting greatly from this by having these volunteers able to help out. And an example of that would be like Friends of China Camp doing interpretive agreements with the state parks. And so the current law sunsets on January 1, 2025. And so this will basically help state parks out if it passes through both houses. And I don't see any opposition. It's actually saving state parks money by having those docents. So it's a pretty great piece of legislative. All right, now we are going to go into our advocacy 101. And some of you have done this before, but I just want to make sure everyone's ready for lobby meetings and knows what to expect and what our policies are for corp when you go into an office. So our priorities for corp are to support recreation infrastructure, including investments in parks, trail maintenance, transportation, education, and new parks and underparked communities. We promote equitable access for all to outdoor recreation, primarily for underserved and urban communities, and we enable business success for the outdoor recreation industry, which includes collaborating with our membership to advocate for policy affecting the industry. This is our vision. Basically, we just want the capital to know about us. There was a long time when the industry wasn't partnering together and we weren't cohesive. And when we showed up to Sacramento, so different companies and nonprofits were advocating for different things and not getting much credit for different policies that we helped advocate for. So Corp was formed, I think 6 years ago. It's our 6th annual summit. And so we brought a cohesive voice to Sacramento, and we continue to strengthen that relationship with all of these members in CNRA. So at Corp, when we decide on a position with the bill, it's a little bit complicated sometimes. Like Doug had mentioned, we haven't taken a position on the climate bond. We just haven't come to a cohesive agreement on how we feel about it. It's a very large bond. It will, if it passes, it would go on to the ballot next year. So it's quite complicated. So when we look at legislation and we take it to our policy committee and we decide on how we are going to interact with that piece of legislation. And in that process, we decide if we're going to support, oppose, or stay neutral. And sometimes we get even more involved with the support process and decide that we're going to sponsor a bill like we did with the tent manufacturers bill. And that's where our role in advocacy comes. We're either the leader, the partner, or neutral. And our example is AB 267, that we are the lead sponsor. SB 620, the low impact camping bill, we are the partner. And climate bond, we are currently neutral. For the lobby sessions, we will be giving everyone key components of the climate bond that we particularly like. So you will have those talking points just in case any members ask how we feel about it. Because at this point, it seems like people are trying to gauge what the feeling is and the temperature in the room on the climate bond. The next step in the process is we provide a letter of support for committee hearings for each bill that we are in support of. Sometimes we'll ask for amendments like we did with the PFAS bill last year. And so that was, we will support if amended. Next step is our lobby meetings, which is what we are doing next Tuesday. Very exciting to be back in person doing that and not just on Zoom. And then our last plan of action is call to action that's when we ask our supporters to write letters. We partnered with OIA in the past on that and done forms online where a constituent can just fill out the form in agreement with the bill and then submit the form, and it'll automatically send emails to their representatives, which is really cool. All right, so for our advocacy workshop, I kind of want to know, and you can raise the thumb or a hand, how many of you have ever contacted an elected official's office? Nice. Doug, I know you have. What was your experience like? Let's see, calling someone? Mason, what's your experience like when you contacted an elected official's office?
Many experiences, pretty varied. I would say keep it simple and tie it to like a personal story if you have one, or at the very least, like what motivates you to be there today.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I'll give a quick example. Just say, going to the, I've written letters to my local legislation centers before. I haven't had any responses to them, but I have got put in on their mailing lists. And the only real interactions I've had is when we go up to the Capitol or have a virtual meeting where we actually get back and forth and some dialogue. So.
If I could just mention a really good icebreaker. Sadly, a lot of the folks in the Capitol, both the legislators themselves and staff, they're not terribly outdoorsy. So what I like to do and what I recommend of my clients is ask them to lean in and ask them to provide you with sort of their experience, their best, their favorite outdoor experience, you know, growing up, whatever the case may be. So it gets them sort of locked into a framework.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good tip. That's on our next slide.
Oh,
we learned well from
I just
Doug.
stole your thunder.
No, we stole yours. Yeah, let's see. Maybe what else is on here? Kenji, do you feel like our voice has been heard when we've contacted offices before?
Yeah, I think so. I think the most they're heard is when you're their constituent. So you live in their district, or you have specific stories or anecdotes that relate to their specific area. So knowing the geography, the reach of that particular lawmaker, and maybe even a little bit about what they're hot on, you know, makes a big difference. You know, like our meetings with Laura Friedman or with Eduardo Garcia. You know, these are we have a lasting impact when we have those kind of stories to tell.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we really felt our voice be heard last year during the PFAS bill. We got our amendments in, and we had the sponsors actually would have a meeting with us and talked about everything. So that was pretty great. So yeah, as Doug mentioned, we like to get on a personal level when we go into lobby meetings. So we do our introduction. So when you first walk in, you'll probably have a lead on your team, likely someone from our policy committee or from our board, to start off introductions and pass it around. So you'll have to be prepared to tell them your name and why you're there, who you're there on behalf of, if you're a court member. And then we'll get on to our personal level questions. So I'm going to ask each lead to, split this question up to other people, and so people can get more of an experience of leading in a meeting and get a little bit more comfortable with being in lobby meetings, because it can be a little bit intimidating when you first go in and the member's looking at you and they're like, okay, what are you here for? Because they're so used to them. And so what we like to do is start off with, how do you like to get outside? And where are your favorite places in your district to recreate or near the Capitol? Keep in mind, a lot of these staffers do not live in the district. Sometimes that was lost on Zoom calls, since we didn't, that you don't see them in Sacramento, but now they're living in Sacramento. They don't know much about the district for a lot of them. Some of them haven't visited the district yet either, especially during the pandemic. Yeah. And some of the members we know don't get outside. There's one assembly member in particular that we meet with pretty regularly, and she goes for walks by the river, and that's great. We like to encourage that, but she's not a mountain biker and refuses to get on a mountain bike with us. Yeah, and my number one tip for these sessions is remember, these are people. They prefer to have a conversation. They don't want to be educated. They don't want to be talked at. So we like to kind of make it more of a back and forth. You can say your point, but let them respond, make it more conversational, so they feel included. Otherwise, they're going to shut off and not really want to continue the meeting too much longer. After you get on a personal level, someone on the team will talk about why the outdoor industry is important. We have a lot of talking points on this that we'll provide you with in your packets. But if there's anything that you want to talk about of why we're important, whether it's mental, physical health or whatever, tell your lead that. You'd love to take that point during the session and get that point across to them. And a lot of them don't realize how much money we bring into the state annually and how many jobs we supply. And that's just saying that our industry is important. Please keep in mind, this does include RV, motorized is included in these numbers. So don't discredit that. Does anyone have any questions?
Lexi, this is more there are more bills on our list than we've had in previous years. Do we speak to some? Do we leave behind a piece of paper that shows our position on these bills? How are we gonna, it's gonna be hard to talk about all of these.
Yeah, so we'll have pamphlets for everyone to leave with staff members of our full priorities list, who corp is, all that, and like just a little pamphlet. But for each lobby meeting, you will have priorities. Like we won't be talking about the tent bill in every meeting. Like for if you're going to a senator office, you will only be talking about the two the two Senate bills. And sometime in the past, I believe that we've brought up like assembly bills in those meetings. We'll just leave the pamphlet this time around. Typically offices deny meetings if a bill is still in first house, especially if it's still in appropriations on suspense file or something like that. And we'll be back to Sacramento, so I don't really want to prioritize anything that hasn't gotten out of first house yet. Keep it where it is and the importance for that member. Most of the meetings will be with appropriations members or staff, so you'll be prioritizing those bills in the assembly or that. The only one that's going to have a major list of bills is going to be the assembly appropriations meetings, because we do have a big list there. But we'll have a couple of key bills that we are trying to get out in those.
Okay. Good. And so that'll be kind of session by session, and we'll have a list and indication of which ones to talk about.
Yeah, with your schedule, you'll have who the member is, a background on the member, maybe a key thing to bring up with them, like if it's Senator Brian Jones in San Diego talking about OHV, he's a big OHV guy, something like that. It'll give you little tips about him and what his district, public lands in his district that you can bring up if you'd like. And then also your priorities for talking to him and where the bill's at.
Great.
Yeah, and you're not going to have stacked meetings where you feel rushed. So you'll have about 30 minutes at least, hopefully between each meeting, and to, in order to find the office so you don't get lost. And then also your lead and you can go over who's saying what and what the priorities are for that meeting.
Hey, Lexi, just a quick question. Do you have any tips for how we leave the office? So we're, we stand up and we're leaving, and there's usually some card exchanges. Any tips on that, especially if you're from the district or specific elements about the topic we're covering in these meetings, just to have the desired impact that we want?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I also brought up an important thought for me. Please do not advocate for bills that are not on the corp support list. I'm happy to introduce you to staffers if you want to talk about something on your priority list for your organization or company and set up a different meeting. But during the corp meetings, we don't want to give the wrong impression that our board has approved, some kind of support that we haven't. So that's really important when you leave an office. Please don't throw something else in. But also shake their hands. You can invite them out, like CNTB likes to invite everyone out to Auburn since they're close by in Sacramento to go mountain biking. You can invite them to your business. That is definitely acceptable. And I'm happy to help set that up if you need it, or you're welcome to just give them a card and invite them to your business if the business is in their district. Anything like that is totally acceptable. And yeah, if you want to swap cards, totally great. I can also give you contact information after the summit.
And did you want to go over business attire?
Yeah, so if everyone could at least wear a blazer, that would be great for the meetings. And no pajamas underneath. We're not on Zoom meetings anymore.
Pants required, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be in a business suit. And some folks like Raquel from Alpine Parrot, it's going to be wearing her pants because that makes sense, showing off her brand, but also, a button down over it or a blazer is appropriate. But yeah, it is business attire. No jeans or pajamas.
Oops.
Great.
Are masks still being worn in the Capitol, or like what's the situation there?
Oh, no, you're all good, Kenji.
I
Some
wanted to wear
offices,
masks,
some
but-
offices, you'll see it on the outside of their doors where they say mask still required, but it's just because they're lazy and they haven't taken down the sign, honestly. But yeah, I would caution folks, yeah, do bring something.
We can definitely bring name tags if you'd like. I hadn't thought of that, but
Interesting. It's a good idea.
I'm thinking like a name tag from the university. That's all right.
yeah, sure. You can wear your own if your business provides it. I can also get sticker name tags for anyone that doesn't have them.
Great idea.
Writing it down now. Great. Any other questions? We'll have packets go out. Hopefully I'll have schedules, but maybe not because some offices are taking a while to get back to us. But I'll at least have ledge talking points for each bill to you by Thursday, and Expo participant packets out too. And yeah, worst comes to worst, we'll have schedules on Monday or Tuesday morning. But
All right. Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
awesome. Great. And if you have any questions, concerns, anything, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on Tuesday.
So,
Thank
Great
you.
job, Lexi.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you, Lexi.
thanks all.
Hey, Lexi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey,
Can I stay on for 30 more seconds or do
Yeah.
you?
should I stop
good.
recording?
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. If
Do you
I-
care if I